Okay, so now that you guys were able to actively read this end of part one, book one, just wanted to review with you real quick before we moved on to your next assignment, which is actively reading book 5 all to yourself. Okay, so we know that these first 5 lines are one sentence where Homer, who is the narrator of the story at this point, asks the Muse, the daughters of Zeus, to help him tell the story of Odysseus. And then in this next part, he goes into a better description of Odysseus. And if you notice, there's some commentary on his heroic deeds. Notice how the line starts over here, where it says he saw the townlands. This is actually part of line 5, but to keep the same rhythm throughout the poem, the author has split up 2 different stanzas in one line. Therefore, the word he is going to start after the word Troy. Now they go on to describe Odysseus. He saw the townlands and learned the minds of many distant men, right? So if you learn the minds, right, you get to know people. And then he weathered many bitter nights and days in his deep heart at sea, right? So because of the weather, right, it was very bitter. He was out there for a long time at sea, while he fought only to save his life, to bring his shipmates home. So through all of this was his intent. And I would definitely argue that this is heroic. But, right, notice the shift here. We learned that in poetry. But not by will nor valor could he save them. So did they make it home? Nope. No men made it home with him. For their own recklessness, right, their reckless behavior destroyed them all. And notice the dash here. We're going to get more information as to why. Calls them children and fools. They killed and feasted on the cattle of Lord Helios, the sun. All right. You don't feast on the beef of a god, right? And Lord Helios, we know now because of the epithet or the title that follows his name, that he's in charge of the sun. They ate and feasted his cattle, and he, Lord Helios, who moves all day through the heaven, because he controls the sun, took from their eyes the dawn of their return. Notice the wonderful poetic statement here. Instead of saying that he just killed him, he took from their eyes the dawn, right? The light. Good. So he gives basically more information about the story throughout this entire opening of the epic, and you'll find this as an epic archetype. The epic basically gives you the entire story in the beginning, and then the books that follow really kind of fill out that story. So now that Homer has given his introduction, Homer again recites of these adventures, Muse, notice the epithet, daughter of Zeus. Tell us in our time, lift the great song again. So he asks again for help from the goddesses to actually tell the story. And now it stops, and notice the change in font here. Because it's italicized, again, this is a summary of what we're not reading. So when it comes to further assignments and you're required to cite from the epic poem, these summaries will be off limits, because in reality what you need to do is you need to cite the actual genre of epic poetry, not something that's been summarized for you. So that's a little summary. And now what I'd like to do is introduce what you're doing for homework with book 5 of part 1. Now remember, we're still in Odysseus's wanderings. Okay. Again, you'll notice the title of the book is Calypso, and it actually includes an epithet called the sweet nymph. So now you know who she is. She's a nymph, which is a goddess, and she's very sweet. What follows there is, again, another italicized summary. So you're introduced to the story here, and then you're given the actual poetry. Okay. Your assignment is to take this document in Notability and annotate as you go through. What I want you to focus on is looking for not only plot elements of a normal narrative story, looking for the narrator, looking for characters, looking for conflict, looking for the setting, things like that. But I also want you to look for epic hero elements, right? So for instance, when it says no words were lost on Hermes, the wayfinder, you've got an epithet here that tells you about Hermes, the messenger of the gods, okay? But they call him the wayfinder because he could find his way anywhere. So make sure you highlight epic elements like the epithet. We know that this is a god, right? So keep that in mind too. There's always divine intervention. And as we move on, let's look at the next one. It says, who bent to tie his beautiful sandals on, ambrosial, golden, that carry him over the water or over endless land in a swish of the wind, and took the wand with which he charms asleep, or when he wills awake the eyes of man. We learn a lot here, right? Not only do we have beautiful imagery of these wonderful sandals that he has that take him over water or land, but a swish, right? So notice here, we've even got some onomatopoeia, right, of the wind. And he's got a wand, right, which is his tool of his trade. And it tells you what he does with it. So within this first line, you really get a lot of information about Hermes. Okay, so when you're editing and when you're annotating and reading, make sure that you're not only underlining or highlighting, but that you're also going back and making sure that you've annotated elements of the story. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. If not, have a wonderful time reading about Odysseus's adventures with Calypso.